Give it up for Kelly Evans and the Center for Entrepreneurship team. They are dope and they are amazing. I also want to, every now and then you have a list, you miss somebody. There are two people that I want to just thank for helping us to get into this space. The first is the team from Sherwin-Williams. They are in the house today, and all of the beautiful colors. This was a blue when we got it, but it's Chicago Urban League now. The other is the legal team, and they did an amazing job, and that is Graham Brady and his team from Taft Law. And they were here earlier today as well. So I just want to make sure that I get that on tape so I can send it to them. But we are here with my sister, an amazing leader in her own right, and that is Keianna Barrett from the Business Leadership Council, the president and CEO of the Business Leadership Council. And let me just say that she has been leading that group with such amazing vision. And it is an honor and a privilege to partner with you. And I know that when you, Melinda, and I get together, we're gonna mess some stuff up. So just get ready. Just get ready, get ready, get ready. But today we're talking about just the state of Black business. And when Kelly talked about the podcast idea, I said this is really appropriate for that idea. So I want to jump right into it because I know that Kelly is a stickler for schedule, and I've thrown her a bit off the schedule, but we'll get back on, Kelly, I promise. So, Kelly referenced it. A lot of folks referenced it during the ribbon cutting. We know that there is an assault on diversity, equity, and inclusion, which sometimes can have an impact on Black business. Would you talk about that and really talk about how important it is for Black businesses to have the tools to navigate not just the general vicissitudes of business, but to really navigate what we all know to be turbulent times?
Sure. Well, thank you once again, Karen, and congratulations on this auspicious occasion. We are so fortunate to have leadership that is bold, that is creative, and that is committed to advancement. And today is just another testament of your vision, and we're just so immensely grateful to have you at the helm of this organization and the mighty team that you all have assembled. And this edifice is just yet another example of why Black empowerment is so necessary. And so, as you alluded to earlier, I feel like we've already had church because the speakers really delivered a very impactful and powerful message. And this is not just about us forecasting the future, but this is about us claiming our future. And we know that when moments like this happen, we've already been through what we've been brought to. So we are well prepared to be able to soldier through this. And this is a defining moment for us as a African American Black business community to really lean into our own value proposition. For far too long, we find ourselves having to make the case and to seek out what almost becomes charitable or a checking of the box. We can no longer afford to have episodic commitments to equity. We need to have cemented structural change. And so the Business Leadership Council, which I never want to take for granted that individuals know who we are, but we are the oldest and the premier Black empowerment, or 17 years ago, the importance of collaboration and the importance of leaning together. And so this, for the organization, is the culture of collaboration. we're going to be unapologetic. We're going to be intentional about how we then lean into one another. Just to be able to see the business showcase and the sampling of the small businesses that you have here today speaks to the fact that we all know our excellence and we know our own relevance to the economy. We're talking a great deal about suspending our economic buying power. We know, and we saw that with Target most recently, that the African American dollar buying power of us collectively is roughly $2 trillion. And that is a major, major factor in our global economy. And so if we have a disciplined dollar mentality, and that if we go about not just flagging which institutions or businesses that we're not going to support, but we need to have a therefore, a comma, and not a period. And then have a list of Black businesses that we are going to support.
That's right.
We can no longer just boycott, but we have to create buoyancy for our businesses. There is an African American female-owned grocery store in Forest Park, Living Fresh. So as we get ready for Thanksgiving next week and we're gonna do our shopping, we may be a little inconvenienced to get just a bit, but put on a good podcast or a good mixtape as you make that drive out there. But we have to make sure that we are demonstrating not only in words but in deed about our commitment to Black excellence and Black empowerment. And so the BLC is so fortunate to have anchor institutions such as the Chicago Urban League that we are partnering with to continue to create what we're calling the Black business agenda. When we talk about our elected officials, we cannot assume that they know what we need. So we have to be able to develop through our critical mass what that looks like, and to be able to provide a blueprint that we can then present to them and then work in tandem with them for accountability purposes. And so we're just grateful, Karen, for having the ability to collaborate with you and to continue to advance the needle.
No, we appreciate that. And I want to lean into what you talked about, the Black business agenda. What are the factors? What are the elements of Black business success that are in the Black business agenda? What do our businesses need?
So one, we need a clear vision. And as we heard earlier, you write the vision and you make it plain. So many businesses simply have to create a business plan that is very clear and concise. I think far too often we find that we have mission creep. And so we want to be everything to everybody. And we have to make sure that we are very clear to the product and the goods and the services that we deliver. And so when we talk about entrepreneurship, we are really about making sure that some of the titans that are within our organization are creating a bridge to some of our emerging entrepreneurs, that we're creating that imparting of information. We were just yesterday, Karen, at a forum that was hosted by both of our organizations as well as Chicago Land Chamber and Baker Tilly. And it was about the One Big Beautiful Bill. How many of you all have heard of that? So
HR 1.
Right. So, when you think about it and you hear the word beautiful, that's a relative term, because on its face, there are many things that are very regressive about the tax policy. But one of the things that we have to do is make sure that we are studying. The Bible says that we have to study to show ourselves approved.
That's right.
And so we need to make sure that you lean into organizations that have done the research, that are very credible. And so the Black Business Report that you all issued earlier this year was a true roadmap to unveil some of those areas. But in the Big Beautiful Bill, there are some policies that could be beneficial to small and Black businesses.
Right.
And so we were a part of that conversation, because what we cannot do is to allow ourselves to be distracted. And so much about what is happening in this climate is truly designed to do just that.
Totally.
So we have to be disciplined to make sure that we are reading beyond the headlines, that we use opportunities such as today and utilize this space and the great matter that's in this room to learn. You might be sitting next to your next business partner, but we don't know that unless we have discourse. One of the elements of the bill talked about generational wealth, and I was really shocked by that because that's a term that has now become very, very common. But for us, we're just trying to make $1 out of 15 cents today most times. So when you think about generational wealth, again, that has to be a very disciplined plan. But we have a great number of family-owned businesses in our community. And many times they perish simply because there is no legacy planning within their structure. And so there are elements of that particular bill that gives incentives around generational wealth and how there are write-offs there. And so it's just important for our organizations to make sure that we're presenting factual, concise, digestible information that entrepreneurs and that business owners can use, and that we are making sure that our established businesses are being a part of the classroom, of imparting key facts, best practices, so that you can learn from someone else's fumble. You don't have to endure that on your own, and that we create a culture in which we are building and edifying one another.
So we're not just talking about reading between the lines, we're talking about getting behind the headlines. I don't know about you guys, but I could care less what's in those emails from Epstein. I just really don't care. That's not gonna change my life one way or the other. So I mean, I think it's important what you said in terms of not being distracted. Earlier, Kelly, Andrew, a lot of the folks were talking about AI. And we know that that is a new tool. And when I think about my recent trip to San Francisco, it was like AI was so pervasive in the advertisement that you saw on buses, in billboards, everything. Talk about how we access new technology, how we access new ideas for our businesses.
So great question, Karen. The city of Chicago is designated as a technology hub. Our Mayor Brandon Johnson and his administration has been very clear about the importance of technology being embedded into enterprise. And so what that means is we're at the gateway, we're at the front door of it. But so often what we find is that we're not innovating and reinventing ourselves. And so when we talk about some of these rollbacks and programs, this is not just a setback, but we need to flip it on this other side and see it as an opportunity. And so as Andrew talked about, there are specialized trainings around AI. There are companies now that are not only looking at college degrees, but they're looking at specialized courses that are taken that will allow you to better understand the vocabulary of AI. And so Kelly just demonstrated that with ChatGPT. I have a college student, and he makes me nervous every time I call him and he's working on a paper. And I said, boy, don't you put that topic into ChatGPT and just print that off and give that to the professor. You have to make sure that AI can be a tool, but we have to know how to use it in an effective way. And so that for small businesses, we have to understand that we don't need to see it as a threat, but we need to make sure that we are knowledgeable about how to best utilize it. And so once again, this center is going to be an ecosystem that will allow for industries that are clear on the benefits of AI to come and to coach business professionals as to the best way to utilize that technology. It is also going to be key that our young people, and when I say young people, I'm not talking just our high school students. It's now starting even in elementary school. And so we have to make sure that we are, again, being very learned about the industries and making sure that we are incorporating and embedding them into our business plan, but in a way that's beneficial and that's measurable. And so oftentimes in leadership, we have to make sure that we are creating not just the plan itself, but how are we embedding in that a feedback loop so that we are ensuring that what we are putting forth and what goes out, the quality is coming back to us. And so I would just strongly encourage that with AI, we lean into it, but we lean into it in a way that we are going into the conversation very clear, very concise, and what we put in it and what comes out, that we still add our own unique element to that and not be totally self-reliant on any of those products.
That is so important, especially with something that has a double-edged sword, like AI. Earlier I was talking about Melinda Kelly and the Chatham Business Association, and one of the things that they are bringing to this building is a partnership with Liberty Bank. We know that it is imperative that our businesses have the capital that they need to grow. Talk about that, and talk about how you're thinking about it, especially as some of the programs that are designed to invest in Black businesses have been challenged legally.
So, as we said earlier, we recognize that there is an assault on African American progression that is clearly apparent. But what I believe is so important, and James Baldwin said it best, that nothing that we face can change if we do not focus on facing the reality of the scenario. And so for us, when we think about access to capital, and I take it back to, I'm a historian by trade, and so when we think about the civil rights movement, the first wave of it was fighting for the end of slavery. The second movement was the right to vote. The third movement was greater opportunities for participation. Now we're at the fourth wave, which is about economic mobility. And so our financial institutions are key to making sure that they're infusing capital into entrepreneurs and into community. And so one of the things that we have continued to focus on is making sure that we are training executives across the landscape so that we have individuals that, one, look like us and that have an appreciation for our plight, to ensure that those are decision makers that are gonna be reviewing applications for loans and for access to capital. But we also wanna make sure that simple things such as our credit and making sure that how we spend and how we create our balance sheets are alignment with opportunities. And so we need to have individuals that are in those institutions, that are in those key roles, that are gonna advocate on the inside and champion our cause. And we need to know who those institutions are and who those individuals are. Our organization is very intentional about ensuring that we have a broad representation of individuals across industries. So we have a financial workshop twice a year where we bring in our financial institutions and the individuals that are within those corporations to talk with us about what they see are some of the barriers to loans, and to credit and to potential, so that we can have those conversations early and often. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we're hearing from the actual businesses themselves, because so often we can create what we believe are strategies that are designed to be impactful, but in true practice, they're still missing the mark. And so we have to ensure that we are creating opportunities to hear from individuals that are, again, on the other side of the table. So this, for us, is now a moment for us to create that cycle and that circle of engagement that we haven't always had. And so again, you know, when I think about DEI, and, you know, some of our colleagues earlier talked about, you know, some of the ways that we can reframe that. What it did do was it did, again, allow for there to be representation of our talent in places where historically we've been underrepresented. Yeah. And so as a result of that, we've got to make sure that we are securing their roles, but taking advantage of the fact that now we have seats at the table and voices that we've not always had, and how we leverage that to our advantage.
Thank you for that. I'm gonna ask the audience to get their questions ready. We're gonna take time for 2 questions. This is my last question. I know you spent time on Capitol Hill, and we have seen what can only be described as a tug of war there, but we're fortunate in that we have a delegation in Chicago that really do work and fight for us. Talk about the importance of advocacy to our congressional representatives, and even those who may not represent us, to businesses.
So we saw earlier at the press conference that we had a beautiful compilation of elected leadership from the state to the city. And one of our side in particular, I was always fascinated with something as fundamental as the quality of their streets. I kept thinking, well, the same snow that falls on the south side falls on the north side, and the same salt that they put down on the south side, they put on the north side. So why are our streets and potholes so pervasive? And I had some conversations with some of my colleagues that worked for elected officials from the north side, and they talked about coordinated resources. They talked about, from the city, you have a pool of money that is designed for capital improvements, but it can only go so far. That has to do street lights, that has to do streetscape, that has to do sidewalks, it has to cover a broad landscape. But also you have the county, you have the city, and you have federal buckets of money. And what those elected officials did was they worked in collaboration to draw resources from each of those buckets to really make sure that they were able to make the caliber of impact within their community. And so we have to adapt that same level of coordination and engagement. So one of the things that we need to be mindful of, outside of some of this other noise, is that the Illinois congressional delegation is going to change. We will have 4 freshman members of Congress due to members retiring or seeking other offices. And so with that, we're losing seniority in the House. And what that means, as we all know, since seniority gives you greater access and greater control. So what we then need to do, we can't change that, but what we can change is to make sure that we are informing the candidates that are seeking those offices, that they are clear on our needs. And so not only are we saying that to them and going out to candidates forum, and I'm gonna make a selfish plug, we will be hosting a candidates forum collectively with the Urban League, with the Chatham Business Association, with the South Shore Chamber, with the Austin Neighborhood Association, as well as the Illinois State Chamber, to make sure that we are putting before these candidates our Black business agenda. But we also want to make sure that they are clear that we exist. They work for and with us, and that is clear. And so when we talk about government, it is a vast tool, but it is only as good as the constituents that are going to be very conscientious, very vocal, and very solution driven. And so we need to make sure that we are watchful of, you're gonna be getting a lot of mailers, you're gonna see a lot of commercials, you're gonna see about a lot of forums. Take the time to get to know these candidates. Take the time to make sure that you are registering voters, young voters, making sure everyone that's eligible to vote in your household comes out, because it's gonna be critically important that we demonstrate how critical our voting mass is, and that we have leadership that is going to champion causes that are gonna allow us to continue to advance the needle and to continue to have opportunities for economic enterprise that we rightfully deserve.
Thank you for that. And think about who you see when they're not running for office.
Very true.
We have a Rael.
Yeah. My name is Chet. Hold on. Go ahead. Okay. Well.
There's one right there.
All right. My name is Rael Jackson. My question is, regarding DEI. I come from a place where I remember in the 90s, people actually had budgets for Black marketing to invest into the Black community. And I saw with DEI, those people that were in those positions, they were not really empowered to invest in the community, so they weren't able to even show an ROI.
So one of the things that you said, as it pertained to DEI officers and practitioners, that was a very knee-jerk reaction post George Floyd, and corporations felt a compulsion to do something. So they put diversity statements on their website, they hired individuals. But I always say you trace the dollars. If there is not a budget associated with the position, then it is posture. And so one of the things that we are looking to do with the BOC is to do a procurement scorecard.
Okay.
As we are looking at companies and institutions and where they're spending their dollars. So we're asking basic questions. What was your total spend? How much of that was with Black businesses? What were the 3 largest categories of spend? And then grading them on that. And what was their engagement and outreach process? And so with that, that will allow us to hold them accountable, so that in many of these, particularly corporations and public institutions, they are receiving public dollars. We are their shareholders. We are shopping at these locations. So it's important that we're making informed decisions. And that's what I said earlier about the disciplined dollar. You'll hear a lot, and I was reading just yesterday about the blackout that is being socialized, which I think, again, is great that we are being cognizant of where we spend. But again, a parallel path to that has to be, well, if not this, then that. And this is where, again, we need to look at, and even in our own households, where do you spend the lion's share of your dollars? And based upon that, that should be the basis for business planning. When we're talking to entrepreneurs about areas that warrant their participation, it should be guided by the needs that we have. I worked in construction for years, and it was woefully underrepresented by people of color and women. One of the major areas of deficiency was landscaping, and maintenance. And so when I would talk to entrepreneurs, I talked about the areas where we needed representation. And again, that goes back to our trade schools and high schools, so that we're talking early about these trades. Young people aspire to be what they see. If they don't see anyone that looks like them, it doesn't even register that that is a viable career path. So we, through this procurement scorecard, want to elevate and hold companies and institutions accountable. But we talked about this, Karen. There are many companies that have stood steadfast behind their commitment, but we sometimes don't hear about them. So just as we use our megaphone to call out the bad actors, we also need to lift up those who are vested, so that they, one, are insulated and are motivated to continue to lean into our communities, and to, again, to make sure that we are protecting our professionals that are there, that again are going to be on the inside making the case for why inclusion makes good business sense at the end of the day.
That's exactly right. And, you know, what I would say is that when the cycle changes, because you're right, it will. When folks get back into the corporate headquarters and in the C-suites, I think that there will be an incentive for them to think about the BLC and how they work with them, to think about the Urban League, how they work with us and other organizations that have the ability to be responsive in the community. One more question. Yes, sir.
So since Ms. Keianna brought up the future, our future are those children who went viral this week. Could you make the link between where we are now and those children and how we have to work together until the next election? You get the purpose of my question?
I believe I do. So you said young.
Since you brought up, you opened the door and you said young people cannot be who they do not see. Sure. We know what went viral this week. We know, and that's us, not white people, not Hispanic people. So could you make the link between, since you opened the door, I was gonna ask another question, because you opened the door beautifully, between what that event and where we are now, how we have to work together to clean house. Make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you for the question. By all means, that was extremely painful to watch. And to know that we have work to do still. And I grew up in an environment where it wasn't just what my parents and what rules existed in our household at our address, but it was about community accountability. So if I was doing something that I shouldn't have been doing, our neighbor I knew was gonna handle me. And then once my parents got home, we're gonna tell them and I was gonna get handled again. We've lost that. And we have to recognize that. And we have to be very mindful that we've got to create some meaningful solutions around that. That there is a great deal of embedding back into the fabric of family that has taken on a totally different makeup today. And so I think we have to have honest conversations about how we heal, because there's brokenness. Right. And that's a lot of what we're seeing with these rollbacks, is an attempt to really continue to fracture the Black family and the Black community. Right. And so we have to be walking ambassadors and role models of what we want to see. And so I think we've heard that there's been a great deal of support for the family, the mother and her children. They've been relocated to another community. There's been an obvious discovery that some of those individuals that were a part of the attack have kind of been a menace to the society that they live in and the building that they live in. So accountability around property management. So there's a lot of layers to what we need to address. And so this is what.
But it just tells us here that we aren't here to just learn about how to grow our business for our families. We have to grow our businesses for community. So thank you. This is the also what you do every day. Thank you so much for what you do. All right, so Kelly?